My name's David Laser, welcome. Our guest of honour today is a professional spy. After receiving a BA from Harvard University and an MA from Johns Hopkins University, Glenn Carle went on to serve as an operations officer in the Central Intelligence Agency for nearly 25 years, where he worked for nearly 20 years undercover in a number of posts as a case officer on 4 continents. From 1997 through to August 2001, he worked principally on trying to detain or kill Osama bin Laden. His last position within the CIA was as Deputy National Intelligence Officer for Transnational Threats, in other words, terrorism. This position on the National Intelligence Council made him effectively one of the 3 most senior officers for terrorism analysis in the entire American intelligence community. His book, The Interrogator, which has been heavily redacted by the CIA, has been described as possibly the best and most truthful account, censorship notwithstanding, ever published of life inside the CIA. Spy turned author and public speaker, Boston Red Sox supporter, grandson of a man who once received a shooting lesson from Annie Oakley, a man who singularly refused to condone torture against Al-Qaeda operatives. Would you please welcome Glenn Carle to the Sydney Writers' Festival? Thank you. All-American boy, obviously bright, love your mum and dad, you dedicate this book to them. Mm-hmm. Dutiful husband, loving father and son. When did you decide you wanted to become a spy?
Yeah, it was in decide, I don't know, but I first thought about it in 1982 or late 1981. And that's because I grew up in Boston. I'm the 4th generation of my family to live in the same house, which is unusual for Americans. And I went to university exactly 3.5 miles from my house. I measured it. And I used to jog home with my laundry over my shoulder, and it was precisely that far. I went to Harvard, as you mentioned, and I love Boston, but I had always wanted to go somewhere else and see something else and learn a foreign language. So during college and after, I went to France for a number of years. And about the fall of 1981, I decided, okay, I've been an expatriate for several years, and it's very comfortable in Paris. The cafes are nice, the girls are pretty, and everyone sits and talks big talk in the cafes while doing really nothing, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a drone, and surely I have some destiny I should pursue, and so I went home. I took a job briefly in a bank, not wanting to do it, but having to figure out what to do while I tried to get in the Foreign Service. And the experience in the bank was so distressing to me, actually. This is true. I never really wanted to be a banker, that I decided surely there is something that will challenge me. This was quite explicit, my thought, will challenge me intellectually, morally, and maybe even physically to my limit. What could that be? Oh, I know. I'll try being a spy. That must be wild. And so that's what the first thought was.
So you decide you want to be a spy. How do you go about becoming a spy? Who recruits you? Do you call up Langley, Virginia and say, look, I'd like to be a spy. I used to be a banker?
Today, there's the internet, and you type in CIA, and the website comes up, and I think they have a link that you click, apply. I think that's literally it, or at least one way. In my day, which is unfortunate I can even say that still now, but time passes, in the early 80s and the 70s, that you couldn't do that. But I had an idea. I was close friends with the head of the Career Services Department at Harvard. And so I went to see her, and I said, Margot, how do you contact the CIA? And I knew she would know the answer. And she said, Glenn, and she slid across the table a phone number. She said, by calling that number.
And you did.
And I did. So there were various twists and turns, but it's a long, convoluted story. But the short version is the second best memoir by a CIA officer is by a man named David Atlee Phillips, who, conspiracy theorists, and I'm sure there are a number of you there, may know his name. One of his aliases was Maurice Bishop, and he was accused of having met Lee Harvey Oswald and planned the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He wrote, it was a very good memoir, and he spoke at my grad school, and I missed his talk. So I went to the administration office where a fellow student was working, and I said, I missed Phillips's talk. I'd love to speak with him. She said, yeah, it was really good. And I said, well, I know, but I want to talk with him. Can you give me his number? And she said, no, Glenn, I can't do that. And I said, well, I know you can't do that, but can you give me his number? And she said, well, really, Glenn, I can't. And so I said, Maggie, this will be just between us. And so she blushed and gave me his number. And I called him up, and I said, Mr. Phillips, I'd like to meet with you. And he did. And I said, I want to get into the CIA. What do I do? And he had someone call me several days later who said, and this is true, he said, Glenn, David gave me your name. He spoke very highly of you. I'd like to get together, meet me Tuesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. on the corner of 17th and Massachusetts. I'll be in a blue Ford. And that was it.
What does it take to be a good spy?
A lot of my colleagues and I, when we start, when we say spy, I'll specify a bit. And we're talking about an operations officer, which means the CIA officers that we all watch in the movies, the people overseas, whose job is to convince people to commit treason and spy for the United States. So we all imagine that will be someone who's hail fellow, well met, slap you on the back, take you out for a drink, wink at the woman, slide his hand down, the back of her dress. That's not true. At least for work.
Some of it's true, though. Some of it's true.
For work. So when you take the Myers-Briggs personality assessments, as we did over and over, we all tried to, certainly I did, try to game the system and project to this gregarious Jack Armstrong, outward-going, guy. And in fact, that's not what makes a good spy. The personality profile of the ideal spy, and I don't say this to aggrandize myself at all, seriously, is my personality. And what does that mean? I test consistently, over and over on these Myers-Briggs things, right in the middle. And the agency, the ideal, to the extent there is such a thing, for a case officer is someone who is at ease in social settings, like the cocktail parties I just described, or here, but has no need of other people and can act in contentment alone.
Presumably you have to be able to thrive in ambiguity. In a world of ambiguity, you have to be able to lie shamelessly. Would that be true?
Those are two separate things, but I think each is true. The first is certainly a quality or characteristic that the agency seeks. That's a harder thing to find, but it is important. The psychological constitution that does thrive in ambiguity, that realizes that there is right and wrong, but that it's also right and wrong are also relative terms, and that there may be multiple truths or there may be no right answer to a given question. And yet, one with this realization of confusion or multiple possible truths, nonetheless can act with purpose and principle. That is a quality that they seek. It's much harder to find. The lying shamelessly part gets to a paradox. The agency seeks, as one would hope, and makes sense, individuals of really high moral principle. It's a hard job, and the stakes are high, and you act alone so that no one is looking over your shoulder. And what you tell your superiors, they have to believe because they won't know what you've done on your own. So you look for people of high moral caliber, which means that we're all raised to be honest people. And if you're honest, it's hard to tell a lie. So in our training, we go through exercises. The training can last 2 years. In my case, it was 2 years. And the exercises are not only how to pick a lock or to avoid being followed, but also how to lie. We practice how to lie. It does not come naturally to me, certainly, at first.
So
you learn.
What kind of lies do you have to be in the business of telling? Presumably you have to lie about who you are. You have various pseudonyms.
Yes.
You have to lie about your political allegiances. You have to win people's affections disingenuously.
All of the above at different times, certainly. The most simple lies are, as you mentioned, for 20 years I was undercover. So to the outside world, and there are all different kinds of cover, but that's a different subject. To the outside world, I was a diplomat. To everyone in my life, other than my parents, who knew where I worked but not what I did, I told them. My wife, who knew where I worked but not really what I did. And one friend from university who smelled a rat, and so I felt I had to tell. He was making me apprehensive. So I told him, and that was it. I did not tell my brother for 15 years. And everyone else knew me as a diplomat. So they'll say, my brother would visit me in Washington, say, I'd love to see your office. And I'd say, I don't know, security's really tough, it's really busy. And he'd say, no, I want to see your office, So, Larry, it's really hard to get in, but let's go to the front of the building, at least you can see that, And he goes, okay. So we would drive to the State Department, and I'd say, here it is, and why don't you go visit the Washington Monument? And I have to park underground, and he'd say, okay, fine. And I'd drive around the corner and then drive 15 miles further to my real office. And that's the routine kind of lie one has to tell all the time. The other things you talked about I wouldn't characterize so much as lies, although you're right, they are. And they are, for one operation, I might be Glenn Carle, and for the next time I might be Cliff Leach, who's the college friend whose name I used to steal all the time. And I told him...
How did Cliff feel about that?
Well, I told Cliff, if ever he were arrested or detained by a mustachioed customs official, I would deny all knowledge. And so he'd better be nice to me. But that kind of lie. And then there are scenarios that you would develop. I might pretend to be a different nationality, and I might pretend to be a writer or a journalist. Well, a journalist we can't do, that's illegal. Some other profession or some other persona as part of the operation. So that's the job.
Even though they're recruiting people of high moral fibre, as you pointed out earlier, a spy has to have a strong moral code. Without putting too fine a point on it, you have to charm. You're a cynic, you're a charmer, you're a master manipulator, and you're a liar, but all in the name of serving your country and keeping it safe.
That's all true, yes. Yeah, the job is to lie and manipulate. And this is one of the, not to make, there's nothing light about it, although we will make endless jokes about it. It is a very difficult, psychologically weighty or burdensome life to have as your primary task to identify your deepest hope, the targets, we use the word target, deepest hopes and motivations and characteristics and quirks and failings and secrets, and earn his or her utter trust and love, and then always manipulate it for your national interest. That is hard.
I imagine you're kind of like a human intelligence data bank of classified information of your country's most